The city was alive with energy, a place where history whispered from every corner. Cobblestone streets stretched out like veins, connecting centuries-old buildings adorned with intricate carvings and colorful facades. Tourists wandered through narrow alleys, their eyes wide with wonder as they soaked in the charm of this European gem. Street vendors called out to passersby, offering everything from freshly baked pastries to handmade trinkets. The air carried the faint scent of flowers mingled with the aroma of roasted coffee drifting from quaint cafes. At the heart of it all stood the Grand Palace, an architectural masterpiece that seemed frozen in time. Its towering spires reached toward the sky, while golden accents gleamed under the sunlight. Flags fluttered gently above its gates, symbolizing the enduring legacy of royalty. Every day, crowds gathered here, not just to admire the structure, but also to witness something truly special: the royal guards. These men and women were more than mere protectors. They were living embodiments of tradition, clad in uniforms so elaborate they looked like characters from a storybook. Among the throngs of visitors stood Alex, a traveler who had journeyed far to see the world. With a backpack slung over one shoulder and a camera dangling around their neck, Alex moved through the crowd with ease. They loved exploring new places, always searching for unique experiences and unforgettable moments. To Alex, rules often felt like suggestions rather than absolutes. This carefree attitude had gotten them into trouble before, but it had also led to some incredible adventures. Today, however, would prove different. As Alex approached the palace square, the atmosphere shifted. There was a sense of reverence among the tourists, a quiet respect for the history surrounding them. Families huddled together, pointing excitedly at the mounted guards stationed near the entrance. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, asking endless questions about the horses and the people riding them. The animals themselves were breathtaking, sleek, powerful, and impeccably groomed. Their coats shimmered in the light, and their hooves clicked rhythmically against the stone pavement. Signs dotted the area, written in multiple languages, reminding visitors not to touch or disturb the horses. For your safety and theirs, one sign read. Most people obeyed without question, keeping a respectful distance. But Alex barely noticed the warnings. Their attention was fixed on the scene unfolding before them. The regal guards, the majestic horses, and the sheer spectacle of it all. It was like stepping into another era, a chance to glimpse what life might have been like centuries ago. Unbeknownst to Alex, this fascination would soon lead them down a path they hadn't anticipated. The line between admiration and recklessness is thin, and Alex was about to discover just how easy it is to cross it. For now, though, they were lost in the magic of the moment, oblivious to the storm brewing ahead. The royal guards were impossible to ignore. Towering atop their magnificent horses, they exuded an aura of authority that commanded attention. Each guard wore a uniform so striking it seemed almost otherworldly. Shimmering helmets adorned with plumes, jackets embroidered with intricate gold patterns, and boots polished to a mirror-like shine. Every detail was deliberate, designed not only to protect, but also to inspire awe. These weren't just ordinary soldiers. They were symbols of tradition, discipline, and national pride. Their horses were equally impressive. Standing tall and muscular, these animals radiated strength and grace. Their coats glistened in the sunlight, evidence of meticulous care and training. The bond between horse and rider was palpable, a partnership forged through years of practice and trust. Together, they moved with precision, turning heads wherever they went. To many visitors, the sight of the mounted guards felt like stepping into a painting or a movie scene. It was surreal, yet undeniably real. Tourists couldn't resist capturing the moment. Cameras clicked incessantly as people jockeyed for the best angles. Some knelt on the ground to get a closer shot, while others stretched their arms high above the crowd, hoping to frame the perfect picture. Parents hoisted children onto their shoulders, so even the youngest could catch a glimpse of the spectacle. Despite the chaos, there was an unspoken understanding among the onlookers. Stay back, keep your distance, and respect the rules. Signs posted around the area reinforced this message. Written in bold letters and translated into several languages, they warned against approaching or touching the horses. "Do not cross the barrier," one sign read. Another added, "For your safety and the welfare of the animals." Most visitors heeded these instructions, knowing that such displays of authority deserved reverence. Even those unfamiliar with local customs could sense the seriousness of the situation. There was something about the guards' stoic expressions and upright posture that discouraged any thought of mischief. But Alex wasn't paying attention to the signs, or if they did, the warnings barely registered. Their focus was entirely on the horses, mesmerized by their beauty and power. The idea of snapping a photo up close became irresistible. What harm could it do, really? Surely no one would mind if they stepped just a little closer, right? After all, everyone else was taking pictures too. How could anyone object to someone simply wanting to capture the magic? What Alex failed to realize was that the guards weren't there to entertain tourists. Their presence served a deeper purpose: to uphold order, safeguard tradition, and ensure the dignity of the palace grounds. Every movement they made, every glance they cast, carried weight. They weren't performers putting on a show. They were protectors enforcing boundaries. And when those boundaries were crossed, consequences followed swiftly. As Alex edged nearer to one of the horses, oblivious to the murmurs of disapproval from nearby spectators, the tension in the air grew thicker. The guard seated atop the horse shifted slightly, his sharp eyes narrowing as he observed the unfolding situation. His hand rested lightly on the reins, ready to act if necessary. For now, he remained still, watching and waiting. But it was clear that patience had its limits, and Alex was dangerously close to testing them. Alex's heart raced with excitement as they inched closer to the horse, their camera poised and ready. The animal was even more breathtaking up close. Its coat gleamed like silk under the sunlight, and its eyes held a quiet intelligence that seemed almost human. To Alex, this wasn't just a photo opportunity. It was a chance to capture something extraordinary, something that would make their friends back home jealous. They didn't stop to think about the signs or the murmurs of disapproval from the crowd around them. All that mattered was getting the perfect shot. As Alex leaned forward, their hand instinctively reached out toward the horse's side. It was an impulsive move, driven by curiosity rather than malice. Just one little touch, they thought, convincing themselves it wouldn't hurt anything. Their fingers brushed lightly against the horse's sleek coat, feeling the warmth of its body beneath their fingertips. For a split second, Alex felt triumphant, as though they'd crossed some invisible boundary between observer and participant. But that fleeting moment of satisfaction quickly turned into unease. The horse shifted abruptly, its ears flicking backward as it sensed the unexpected contact. Trained though it was, the animal couldn't help but react to the intrusion. Its muscles tensed, and it took a small step sideways, hooves clattering loudly against the cobblestones. The movement sent a ripple of alarm through the gathered tourists, who had been watching silently until now. Gasps echoed through the square, followed by hushed whispers. Someone muttered, "That was reckless," while another voice hissed, "They shouldn't have done that." Seated atop the horse, the guard immediately noticed the disturbance. His posture stiffened, and his gaze locked onto Alex with laser-like intensity. There was no anger in his expression, just a cold, calculated seriousness that made Alex freeze mid-motion. The guard's presence was commanding, almost intimidating, as if he carried centuries of tradition on his shoulders. He didn't say a word at first, but the look in his eyes spoke volumes. "You've crossed a line." For the first time, Alex realized the gravity of what they had done. The thrill of the moment faded, replaced by a sinking feeling in the pit of their stomach. They glanced around nervously, suddenly aware of the dozens of eyes fixed on them. Some faces showed concern, others annoyance, and a few even amusement at the unfolding drama. Alex tried to smile sheepishly, hoping to diffuse the tension, but the guard's unwavering stare made it clear that this wasn't going to blow over easily. Without hesitation, the guard swung his leg over the saddle and dismounted with practiced ease. His boots hit the ground with a firmness that seemed to echo louder than it should have. Each step he took toward Alex was deliberate, measured, and heavy with authority. The crowd parted slightly, creating a path between him and the offending tourist. No one dared to intervene, not because they agreed with whatever might happen next, but because the scene unfolding before them felt inevitable, like watching a storm approach. Alex stood rooted to the spot, unsure whether to apologize, explain themselves, or simply retreat. Their minds scrambled for words, but nothing coherent came out. Instead, they clutched their camera tightly, as if it could somehow shield them from the impending confrontation. The guard stopped a few feet away, towering over Alex despite not being particularly tall. His uniform, his bearing, and the weight of his role made him seem larger than life. "You crossed a line," he said finally, his voice calm but firm, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, delivered with a kind of finality that left no room for argument. Alex swallowed hard, their earlier bravado completely evaporated. They nodded slowly, unable to meet the guard's piercing gaze. But before they could utter a word of apology, the guard's next action would leave everyone, including Alex, stunned. The guard's words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. "You crossed a line," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for misunderstanding. Alex nodded again, their throat dry and their mind racing. They opened their mouth to stammer an apology, but before any sound could escape, the guard acted. What happened next was so swift and unexpected that it took a moment for the crowd, and even Alex, to fully process. With precision honed by years of training, the guard raised his arm and delivered a firm, controlled shove to Alex's chest. It wasn't violent or aggressive in the way one might expect from a confrontation. It was measured, deliberate, and undeniably authoritative. But its impact was undeniable. The force of the blow sent Alex stumbling backward, arms flailing as they struggled to regain their balance. Their camera strap dug into their neck as the device swung wildly, and for a terrifying second, it seemed like they might fall flat on their back. The crowd gasped audibly, the collective intake of breath rippling through the square like a wave. Some people instinctively stepped back, while others craned their necks to get a better view of what was happening. A few whispered urgently to one another, their voices tinged with disbelief. "Did he just?" One woman murmured to her companion, her eyes wide. Another man shook his head, muttering something about how this was bound to happen given Alex's behavior. Despite the shock, no one intervened. The guard's actions carried a weight that silenced any potential objections. For Alex, the moment felt surreal, as though time had slowed down. 1 second, they were standing there, heart pounding and cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The next, they were reeling from the unexpected push, their feet scrambling to find solid ground. When they finally managed to steady themselves, their face burned with a mix of shame and indignation. Had that really just happened? Was this guard allowed to do such a thing? Questions swirled in their mind, but none of them made it past their lips. The guard, meanwhile, remained perfectly composed. His expression hadn't changed. There was no hint of anger or satisfaction in his demeanor. He stood tall, his hands now resting at his sides, exuding an aura of calm authority. To him, this wasn't personal, it was protocol. Crossing the invisible boundary around the horse wasn't just a harmless mistake. It was a breach of respect, tradition, and security. And in his world, such breaches couldn't go unchecked. "You've been warned," the guard said, his voice cutting through the murmurs once more. This time, it carried a note of finality, as if to say the matter was settled. Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked back to his horse, each step radiating purpose. The animal stood patiently where it had been left, seemingly unfazed by the commotion. With practiced ease, the guard mounted the horse, adjusted his reins, and resumed his position as though nothing unusual had occurred. But for Alex, everything had changed. Standing there amidst the whispers and stares, they felt exposed and humiliated. Their earlier confidence had vanished completely, replaced by a deep sense of regret. They glanced down at their camera, still clutched tightly in their hand, and wondered how things had escalated so quickly. All they had wanted was a closer look, a better photo, a memory to take home. Instead, they had earned a lesson they would never forget. As the guard rode away, resuming his patrol of the palace grounds, the crowd began to disperse. Some lingered a little longer, casting curious glances at Alex before moving on. Others snapped photos of the departing guard, capturing the aftermath of the incident for their social media feeds. For Alex, however, the day had taken a turn they hadn't anticipated. The grandeur of the palace, the majesty of the horses, and the allure of adventure now felt overshadowed by the sting of embarrassment and the realization that they had pushed too far. The shove may have lasted only a second, but its effects lingered long after the guard had turned his horse and resumed his patrol. Alex stood frozen in place, their chest still tingling from the force of the push. The crowd around them began to thin out, with tourists returning to their own activities, snapping photos of the palace or chatting about what they'd just witnessed. But for Alex, the world felt smaller, quieter, as if the noise of the square had been muted by the weight of their humiliation. Their cheeks burned red, not just from embarrassment, but also from the realization that everyone had seen what happened. Strangers who moments ago were simply fellow travelers now seemed like judges, silently critiquing Alex's actions. Some glanced at them with pity, others with thinly veiled amusement, and a few with outright disapproval. One older man shook his head as he walked past, muttering something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like tourist mistakes. A young couple nearby laughed softly, though they tried to stifle it when Alex looked their way. Alex wanted nothing more than to disappear. They adjusted the strap of their camera, which suddenly felt heavier than before, as if it carried the burden of their poor decision. Their mind replayed the scene over and over. The guard's stern expression, the firm shove, the gasps of the crowd. Each memory loop brought a fresh wave of regret. What had seemed like a harmless impulse, a quick pat on the horse's side, had spiraled into something far bigger. And now, there was no taking it back. As they finally forced themselves to move, Alex noticed how different everything felt. The cobblestone streets, once charming and inviting, now seemed uneven and unforgiving beneath their feet. The towering spires of the palace, which had inspired awe earlier, now loomed over them like silent witnesses to their folly. Even the cheerful chatter of other tourists grated against their ears, a reminder of how easily their blunder could become fodder for conversation. Back at their hotel later that evening, Alex sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the floor. The day's events played on repeat in their mind, each detail sharper and more painful than the last. They thought about the guard's words, "You crossed a line." At first, Alex had dismissed it as an overreaction, a dramatic response to a minor infraction. But now, sitting alone in the quiet room, they began to see things differently. That line wasn't arbitrary. It represented respect, tradition, and the unspoken rules that held this historic city together. By ignoring it, Alex hadn't just made a mistake, they had shown disregard for something much larger than themselves. They pulled out their camera and scrolled through the photos they'd taken earlier. There was the one of the palace gates, majestic and imposing. Another of the street vendors selling colorful souvenirs. And then, the blurry shot of the horse, captured just moments before everything went wrong. Looking at it now, Alex couldn't help but cringe. It wasn't even a good photo, crooked, poorly framed, and ultimately meaningless compared to the lesson they'd learned. What struck Alex most was the sheer unpredictability of consequences. They had approached the horse thinking only of the moment, the thrill of getting closer, the satisfaction of capturing a unique image. Never once had they considered what might happen if things went awry. Now they understood that every action carries weight, especially in places steeped in history and tradition. Ignoring signs, brushing off warnings, and acting without thought can lead to outcomes far beyond what anyone expects. By the time night fell, Alex's initial embarrassment had given way to reflection. They realized that while the incident itself was embarrassing, it didn't define them. What mattered was how they chose to respond. Would they dwell on the shame, letting it sour their entire trip? Or would they use it as a learning experience, a reminder to approach new cultures with humility and care? As they lay down to sleep, Alex resolved to do the latter. The journey wasn't over yet, and they still had countless opportunities to make better choices, to be not just a traveler, but a respectful guest in this beautiful, storied land. The next morning, Alex woke up with a heaviness in their chest. The sunlight streaming through the hotel windows should have been uplifting, but instead, it felt like a spotlight shining directly on their mistakes. They lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the previous day in their mind. The guard's stern face, the shove that sent them stumbling backward, and the murmurs of the crowd. It all came rushing back, vivid and unrelenting. For the first time in their travels, Alex didn't feel excited about exploring the city. Instead, they were filled with a gnawing sense of self-doubt. Had they ruined their trip? Would every interaction from now on carry the shadow of that embarrassing moment? These questions swirled in their head as they reluctantly got out of bed and prepared for the day. But deep down, they knew avoiding the issue wouldn't make it go away. If anything, running from it would only reinforce the lesson they had failed to learn. Accountability matters. Determined to salvage their journey, Alex decided to revisit the palace square, not because they wanted to confront the guards or relive the humiliation, but because they needed closure. Walking through the familiar streets, they noticed details they hadn't paid attention to before. The intricate carvings on building facades, the cheerful chatter of locals going about their day, the faint scent of blooming flowers carried by the breeze. It was a reminder that the city wasn't defined solely by one awkward encounter. It was alive with beauty and history waiting to be appreciated. When Alex reached the square, they hesitated near the edge of the crowd. The mounted guards were still there, standing tall and dignified as ever. This time, however, Alex kept their distance, observing silently from afar. They studied the horses' graceful movements, the way the guards maintained perfect posture, and the quiet respect shown by the tourists around them. It was humbling to see how effortlessly these elements blended together, creating a scene of harmony and tradition. For the first time, Alex truly understood why boundaries existed, not to restrict, but to preserve something sacred. As they stood there, a young family nearby caught their attention. A little girl, no older than 6, tugged at her mother's sleeve and pointed toward one of the horses. "Can I touch it?" she asked eagerly. Her mother knelt down beside her, speaking softly but firmly. "No, sweetheart, we can't touch them. They're working animals, and we need to show them respect." The child pouted briefly but nodded, seemingly satisfied with the explanation. Watching this exchange, Alex felt a pang of guilt. How many times had someone tried to teach them similar lessons, only for them to brush it off? Later that afternoon, Alex found themselves sitting at a small cafe overlooking the square. With a cup of coffee in hand, they jotted down thoughts in a travel journal they'd brought along but rarely used. At first, the words came slowly, fragments of frustration and regret. But soon, they began to flow more freely. Alex wrote about the thrill of discovery that had driven them to cross the line, the shock of facing consequences, and the clarity that followed. By the end of the entry, they realized something important. Growth often comes from discomfort. Mistakes aren't failures unless you refuse to learn from them. That evening, as they strolled along the riverbank, Alex allowed themselves to smile again. The city's charm hadn't diminished. It had simply shifted. Where once they saw only opportunities for adventure, they now recognized layers of meaning behind every landmark, custom, and rule. Their perspective had changed, not because of shame, but because of understanding. They vowed to carry this newfound awareness with them wherever they went, ensuring that future travels would be marked not just by curiosity, but also by respect. Though the memory of the incident lingered, it no longer weighed them down. Instead, it became a story, a personal reminder of the importance of humility and cultural sensitivity. And perhaps someday, when the sting had faded completely, Alex might even share it with others as a cautionary tale. After all, sometimes the most unforgettable moments aren't the ones captured in photos. They're the ones that change us forever. By the time Alex returned home, the incident in the palace square had already taken on a life of its own. Unbeknownst to them, someone in the crowd that day had captured the entire scene on video. Alex stepping too close to the horse, the guard's firm shove, and the ripple of reactions from onlookers. The clip was short but dramatic enough to grab attention, and within hours, it had been uploaded to social media. From there, it spread like wildfire. At first, Alex didn't realize what was happening. They spent their first few days back home unpacking, sorting through photos, and trying to settle back into their routine. But then notifications began flooding in. Messages from friends tagging them in posts, comments asking if they were the person in the video, and even a few direct messages from strangers expressing sympathy or criticism. Curious, Alex opened one of the links and felt their stomach drop. There they were, frozen in a screenshot, reaching out toward the horse just moments before everything went wrong. The video had gone viral, sparking heated debates across platforms. Some viewers sided with the guard, praising his actions as necessary to uphold rules and protect tradition. Tourists need to respect boundaries, one commenter wrote. This is why we have signs. Others defended Alex, calling the response excessive and questioning whether physical force was justified. It was just a harmless gesture, argued another user. Did it really deserve such a harsh reaction? Memes soon followed, with captions poking fun at Alex's misstep and turning the phrase "crossed the line" into an internet punchline. For Alex, seeing themselves at the center of such widespread attention was surreal, and not in a good way. At first, they avoided looking at the comments altogether, afraid of what they might find. But curiosity eventually got the better of them, and they started scrolling. What they discovered was a mixed bag. Some people mocked their behavior, while others sympathized, sharing stories of their own travel blunders. A few even admitted they might have done the same thing in Alex's shoes, mistaking the guard's warnings as mere formalities rather than serious rules. Despite the negativity, Alex couldn't deny that the incident had sparked important conversations. Many commenters highlighted the broader issue of cultural sensitivity among travelers, emphasizing the need to research local customs before visiting new places. Others pointed out how easy it is to underestimate the significance of traditions when you're caught up in the excitement of exploration. These discussions resonated deeply with Alex, who now understood firsthand how quickly ignorance can lead to unintended consequences. Still, the constant spotlight took its toll. Friends joked about the video during gatherings, often lightheartedly, but sometimes in ways that made Alex squirm. Co-workers teased them about becoming an internet celebrity, though most meant well. Even family members brought it up occasionally, reminding Alex to be more cautious next time. While no one seemed genuinely upset with them, the repeated references served as a reminder that their mistake hadn't faded into obscurity. It had become part of public discourse. To cope, Alex decided to lean into the experience rather than shy away from it. They began reflecting openly about the incident, sharing their side of the story with close friends and family. Slowly, they realized that owning their mistake gave them power over it, rather than letting the narrative be shaped entirely by strangers online. Alex chose to frame it as a learning opportunity, a cautionary tale about the importance of respecting boundaries and understanding context. They also noticed something surprising. Amidst the ridicule and debate, there were moments of connection. Strangers reached out to share similar experiences, thanking Alex for unintentionally starting conversations about responsible tourism. One message stood out. A note from a former palace guard who explained the pressures faced by those in uniform and expressed hope that the incident would encourage others to think twice before acting impulsively. Reading these words softened some of the lingering sting of embarrassment. As weeks passed, the online buzz began to die down, replaced by newer trends and viral moments. But for Alex, the impact remained. The incident wasn't just a fleeting episode. It was a turning point, a reminder that every action carries weight, especially when navigating unfamiliar cultures. Though they never wanted to relive that moment, they knew it had changed them in ways that would shape their future travels, and perhaps even inspire others to tread more thoughtfully. Months after the incident, Alex found themselves sitting on a park bench in their hometown, flipping through the travel journal they had started during that fateful trip. The pages were filled with scribbles, sketches, and reflections, some lighthearted, others deeply introspective. As they reread the entry about the palace square, they couldn't help but smile wryly. What had once felt like a mortifying failure now seemed like a pivotal moment of growth. It wasn't just a story about crossing a line. It was a lesson etched into their memory, one they carried with them every day. Traveling had always been Alex's passion, but this experience taught them to approach it differently. Before, they had viewed exploration as a series of checklists, snapshots to take, landmarks to visit, and adventures to conquer. Now they understood that travel was more than ticking off destinations. It was about connection, respect, and learning. Every culture had its own rhythm, its own unspoken rules, and stepping into someone else's world required mindfulness. That realization didn't dampen their enthusiasm for adventure. It deepened it. They began planning future trips with a new mindset, researching not just what to see but how to engage meaningfully with the places they visited. The viral video continued to pop up occasionally, though the initial frenzy had long since faded. Friends still joked about it, but Alex took it in stride, laughing along and even sharing anecdotes when prompted. Over time, they learned to view the incident not as a source of shame, but as a conversation starter. When people asked about it, Alex spoke candidly, acknowledging their mistake while emphasizing the lessons they'd learned. To their surprise, many listeners responded with empathy, admitting they too had made similar missteps in unfamiliar settings. These conversations often ended with shared laughter or thoughtful nods, reinforcing the idea that everyone makes mistakes and that growth comes from owning them. One evening, Alex received an unexpected message from a stranger online. The sender introduced themselves as a teacher who had shown the viral video to their class as part of a discussion on cultural sensitivity. "Your story sparked such a meaningful dialogue among my students," the teacher wrote. "Thank you for reminding us all that curiosity should go hand in hand with respect." Reading those words brought tears to Alex's eyes. In that moment, they realized their blunder had transcended personal embarrassment. It had become a catalyst for reflection and understanding in ways they never could have imagined. With renewed determination, Alex decided to channel their experience into something positive. They began writing blog posts about responsible tourism, sharing tips and insights gleaned from their journey. Topics ranged from navigating cultural differences to embracing humility as a traveler. Their posts resonated with readers, many of whom reached out to express gratitude or share their own stories. Through these exchanges, Alex discovered a sense of purpose, helping others avoid the pitfalls they had stumbled into. Looking back, Alex knew they wouldn't trade that awkward, humbling moment for anything. Yes, it had been embarrassing. Yes, it had forced them to confront their own carelessness. But it had also opened doors to self-awareness, to deeper connections, and to a greater appreciation for the beauty of diverse traditions. The guard's firm shove hadn't just knocked them off balance. It had nudged them toward a better version of themselves. As they closed their journal and gazed at the horizon, Alex felt a quiet sense of pride. They were still the same curious traveler who loved exploring new places, but now they traveled with intention. The road ahead promised countless opportunities to learn, grow, and connect. And this time, Alex vowed to tread lightly, respectfully, and thoughtfully, ensuring that their footsteps left behind nothing but gratitude.